Hello, assalamu alaikum. Please let me know अगर आवाज clear है और ऊंची है. तो let me know. Yesterday we
Yes,
left.
ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. We left off at taqleed. We're gonna do that, and this starts actually from the next PowerPoint slide. In greater depth. So that ayah that I was looking for yesterday, it really was not in this slide, and I added it in the other slide. Yes, take it and I'll ask you to give it back. Okay, I need it. Now, interestingly, maqasid al-sharia, which means the maqsad means the purpose, right, of the sharia. Now, naturally, Allah gave us this law, which we call the sharia, is simply law, right? If you translate sharia, it turns out to be the law that Allah wants us to follow in this world. What is the purpose behind it? So look, sorry, I think your mic is probably unmuted. Okay, so all five of these were outlined by none other than Imam Ghazali. So he was the one who noted that these five things are the ones that are protected in the Sharia, right? So naturally, what is salah for? What is namaz or fasting for? It is one thing is to protect the person's deen, but also again their own nafs or their own self, right? All of Sharia is to do with all of these. So protecting intellect or aql, protecting nasab or posterity, and protecting wealth. So for example, when you're praying, and I think one of you, I don't remember who it was, but Behishti Zever, I think that's a book that has like the very basics of namaz, roza, and even ablution, all the rulings related pertaining to that. So one of the examples of, for example, protecting wealth would be that if you're praying and then something is on the stove, right? And then you remember it, you had forgotten, and now you're sure you can smell that it's about to burn. You can actually break your salah and go and turn the stove off, right? Instead of thinking कि मैंने अब नमाज शुरू कर लिया मैं नहीं दौड़ सकती, but this is an example of the fact that you're supposed to save wealth, right? Just hold on. Right. The other five legal maxims that were outlined, this was around in the third generation after the Prophet ﷺ. Matters are based on intentions. You all know this already. So there are numerous ahadith that talk about intentions being necessary to look at. So we're not just looking at actions, but we're also looking at the intentions behind them. So I think I gave you that example about not holding a thief accountable if they have, number one, stolen something that is food, right? Food or water, basic needs, and those weren't being fulfilled by the state. Yeah. Can you turn off your mic? And I think, okay, so Nimra has her hand up. Yes, do you have a question, Nimra?
Miss, in the last slide, it was written their intellect. So can you explain, can you just give a reason how can we use that?
Okay, so the maqsad of the Sharia. So when the scholars are coming up with the Sharia and they're doing that using the sources we talked about, right? Quran, Sunnah, and the secondary sources, which are ijtihad and qiyas, etc. So when they're carrying out that process, this will be one of the maqsad, this will be one of the purposes of the Sharia. When you have that in the background, when you know that this is what the Sharia is for, then even though what essentially is happening, and we'll do this in more depth, ijtihad that's happening is simply an interpretation process, right? That we're interpreting what Allah said in the Quran, and all the hadiths that we have, everything that is saved, recorded with us, all of that is being interpreted, right? When ijtihad is being carried out. But this will be there this purpose, right, will be there in the background. So there is this logic behind it. Now, what's interesting also is that the Hanafi mazhab, which we still haven't gotten to, the Hanafi madhab has more logic, or when the mujtahideen are coming up with the rules, they are looking for this logic behind all of the rules. And this is more so in the Hanafi mazhab than any other mazhab, which is interesting because a lot of times we think the Hanafi mazhab, the last slide of this presentation, I'll show you like throughout the world which madhab is being followed in which area. And since it's being followed in the subcontinent more so than in any other place, there's also Egypt now that used to follow Shafi law, right? That was their state law, but now it is Hanafi. So this example for that, actually, I haven't really provided you with an example, but this is what the mujtahideen would do, right? They would know that this is to protect the akal or the intellect of a person. And I can't really think of one example right now, but I mean, that's why I was giving an example of wealth, but I can't think of any other ruling that they used this purpose, I mean, that they came up with using or having this purpose in their mind. And also because I'm not really a muftiya myself, right? So if I went through an ifta course, I would be better able to answer that question for you, because you go through the whole process and like you learn how to do ifta, right? You learn how
Yeah,
to.
Miss, can we say that if we, for example, we memorize surahs while we are praying namaz, so can we say that it helps in making our memory sharp? So that could be also linked with that, with
Yeah,
intellect.
you could say that. I mean, that would be something that you're, some benefit that you're coming up with. But in this situation, what is essentially being said is that the entire Sharia, when they're, the I mean, it's an entire process, right? And we've just
Yeah.
begun that. So we're gonna do that, inshallah, and maybe you can keep that in mind. And maybe when you're studying, like, or reading all of those chapters, there might be one example that actually pertains to this. So let's, inshallah, hold on to that question and
All
maybe
right. Thank you.
answer it together. So, okay, so this was the maqsad of the Sharia, and then the legal maxims that are followed. And again, these are not for us, this is just to give you an idea of how by the, well, actually the 3rd century, right, Imam Shafi wrote his Risala, and then there were actually quite a few centuries in which work on usul al-fiqh wasn't done due to various reasons. And then suddenly there were a lot of scholars that were working on this, and lots of books were written on maqasid al-sharia as well as these maxims, right, these legal maxims. um, so you can see, and this is not for us, right, to sort of like when we're in a situation we don't know what to do, it's not that we're supposed to apply any of these legal maxims anywhere, right? Of course, because at the end of the day, the process was to interpret the Quran and the Hadith, and we're not equipped to do that. But just to give you an idea of what is happening in the background. So, the first one, all of us know, matters are based on intentions. You cannot take out intentions whenever looking at a particular situation. Certainty is not lost due to doubt. So, if there is something you are certain about, then any kind of shak, any doubt will not override that certainty. Al-yaqinu la yazulu bishak. And this is, I think, yeah, for this, I can give you another example of simple ablution. If you know that you have wudu, and you're not really sure that you broke it, right? So let's suppose the next prayer time comes, you had wudu for Asr, and then Maghrib time comes, maybe you're still at IBA, and you're certain you had wudu, but you have this shock or doubt, maybe I don't have it, maybe I broke it, I'm not really sure, but the certainty will not be overridden. The fact that you had wudu and you cannot clearly remember, right, that if you had broken it, then the ruling for that is that you will consider that your wudu to be intact. Difficulty necessitates facilitation. One example of that is cats. So cats are carnivores, right? And the idea is that um, they're like anything that a carnivore has eaten, right? So for example, if a dog has partaken of some meal, then it wouldn't be okay for you to partake of that. However, cats, because they go in and out even at that time, they are domesticated animals, right? So even if they eat out of a plate, it would be okay for you to eat out of it. I mean, that is the fatwa given on it. We're not talking about other factors. ठीक है? Custom is a source of, that is one example. Again, there are many, many others. These are just what's happening in the background. Okay, so custom is a source of judicial decisions, means al adatu muhkama. Adat Urdu mein bhi word use hota hai. And what that means is that in a particular region, what the custom is has some kind of effect on the rulings that will be given to that area. So for example, there is a mahar, right, that the bridegroom has to give to the bride. So that mahar is, if it's not stipulated, the idea is that it should be stipulated and it should be, almost equal to what her family members get. So the amount that her family members usually get, that's the amount that she's supposed to get. If it's not outlined, it will automatically be considered mahre misli. Misli means the like of, right? And so again, the like of means that it should be something that her relatives are getting. And of course, it could be lesser as well. So for example, if they know that the bridegroom can only give something that is lesser than that and they accept that, that's fine, right? However, this again has to do with the custom of the area. The fifth one is harm must neither be inflicted nor reciprocated. So I'm taking out, Chale, let's see if you come up with that point. But for now, just to give you a basic, because this is really deep and high level stuff, right? So for this one, the last one, it just means that if you're harmed, okay, let's suppose somebody came and stole a property, or stole something from your wealth, or harmed something. Let's suppose they harmed a swing that was outside, or something, and you found out who it was. You can't go back and do the same to them. There is this idea of eye for an eye in Islam. So for example, if somebody really bad example, but somebody slaps you, and you say that an eye for an eye, and I'm going to slap you back, right? Technically, exactly doing the same thing to the person is allowed. Okay? However, if you go even like a dot further, you hurt them a little bit more, the slap was a little bit harder, you're going to be accountable now. So they made the mistake, but you're going to be accountable because now you went ahead and took the revenge, and you were, a notch higher than them. Okay? Better than that would be to forgive, and even better than that would be to not only forgive but actually respond with something better, with ihsan. ठीक है, this is how
Excuse
it's.
me, ma'am, I have a question.
Oh dear, अगर हम बहुत ज़्यादा चलें पूछ लें, because then we won't be able to cover. Okay, go ahead and ask. ठीक है.
मैम अभी आपने बात की, अगर पर्सन हमें कोई स्लैप मारे तो हम भी उसको मार सकते हैं, बिकॉज इक्वालिटी की बात होती है इस्लाम में. तो अगर यानी कि कोई पर्सन हमें मार रहा है, यानी कि किल कर
बेहतर नहीं
देता
है
है,
ये, मैंने कहा ये
फिर
बेहतर नहीं है. टेक्निकली अलाउड है, लेकिन बेहतर चीज़ नहीं है करने के लिए. ये समझ आई आपको?
यस मैम, आई हैव गॉट इट. थैंक.
ठीक है, तो ये बहुत ज़रूरी इंपॉर्टेंट बात होती है कि क्या चीज़ अलाउड है, ठीक है, लेकिन बेहतर नहीं है. तो ये क्लियरली आउटलाइंड है कि बेहतर है कि आप माफ़ करें, और उससे भी ज़्यादा बेहतर है कि आप माफ़ करें भी और उसके बाद उनके साथ अच्छा भी करें, अच्छा सलूक भी करें. यानी देव रॉन्ग्ड यू बट यू गो अहेड एंड डू समथिंग दैट्स गुड. ठीक है. सॉरी.
मैम यानी कि फिर हम लोग ये करें, अगर एक पर्सन हमें यानी कि राइट साइड पे मार रहे तो हम लोग अपना लेफ्ट साइड भी आगे कर लें फिर.
सॉरी, क्या क्या अगर किसी ने मारा है? आई सॉरी, डिडंट गेट दैट. कि एक, क्या आप दूसरी तरफ भी उनको कहें कि मारें, ये कह रहे हैं आप? मुझे समझ नहीं आई.
Yes, he is saying that, ma'am. If somebody hits his right side, then he must give his
नहीं.
left
अच्छा
side
देखिए,
public.
जब आप दीन समझ रहे हैं ना, ठीक है, फिलोसफी दीन की, तो आपने सारी कुरान की आयतें और सारी अहादीस को सामने रखना है. जब तक आपके पास एक होलिस्टिक पिक्चर नहीं आएगी तो आप गलती करेंगे. तो एक बात सुन के या एक हदीस पकड़ लें अगर आप, तो फिर आपको यानी गलत आप उस पर एक्ट कर बैठेंगे. ठीक है ना. तो फॉर दिस the other example is जो मैंने एक बार mention किया था कि the Muslim is not supposed to be hurt by one hole twice. यानी अगर आपको किसी ने डसा है, एक होल से एक सांप निकला, उसने आपको bite ke sorry, dasne ko, what do you say? Is it a bite of the snake or is it? So you have totally
Please.
out off track me. Ji. Okay. So you're supposed to be careful and not get hurt twice, ठीक है? तो कोई source of जो hurt होता है ना, जिस तरह आपके पास आजकल बहुत सारी research है on toxic relationships, ठीक है? Now you have to find the balance कि आपको पता है ये toxic relationship है, इससे आपको नुकसान हो रहा है, आपने अपने आप को नुकसान नहीं पहुंचाना, but it might be your parents and now parents का कितना ज़्यादा आता है कुरान में, ठीक है? तो आपने parents के साथ अच्छा सलूक करना है. Now that balance is a very high level thing, and that's exactly what this life is about, that you have to find that balance, right? And you have to understand कि not everything is black and white. तो इसी तरह अब आपने दूसरा गाल अपना क्यों देना है? Why would you give your other cheek? Because you're causing harm. दो बातें लिखी हुई हैं इधर, लिखा हुआ है harm must neither be inflicted nor reciprocated. तो आप यदि अगर अपनी दूसरी गाल दे रहे हैं तो फिर that means that you're wanting your another harm to be inflicted on you. That's not what it's saying, right? What it's saying is that harm inflict भी नहीं होगा और reciprocate भी नहीं होगा. This is the ideal, ठीक है? अब वही बात है कि ये एक लिखा किसने है, ये यानी फुक़हा ने लिखा है. This is written by scholars who have already been working, their lives in coming up with rulings, looking at the Quran and the Hadith and the secondary sources. Okay, Yahya, I would prefer if you can please jot down your questions and please email me. Even if it's like 10, 20 questions, just email them to me. But we cannot spend class time in answering all of the questions because फिर हम जो हमने cover करना है वो हम नहीं कर सकेंगे, ठीक है? So at the end when I'll ask, yes, I can answer one or two questions, but mashallah, you have a lot of questions, which is good, right? But if you can email them to me, I'll be able to give you better answers, inshallah, in depth. So Shati, we divided the maqasid into zaruriyat, the essentials, the complementary, and the embellishments, which again is showing that different scholars looked deep into the maqasid, looked at all of the law. By this time there was around, I think, 700, 800 years of scholarship, Islamic scholarship, and they divided the maqasid into what was essential, what was complementary, and what was just embellishments. ठीक है कि क्या चीज़ ज़रूरी है, right? यानी एक ज़रूरी मकसद है, फिर एक है जो बेहतर कर दे, जो complement करे, खूबसूरत बना दे. We want to make everything beautiful, right? I mean, your essentials are that you want a sofa, you want something to sit on, you have essential, needs for furniture, but then we want something complementary, and then we want to embellish it, right? The more beautiful, the more, aesthetics we can put into it, it looks more beautiful. That's exactly the way it is with deen as well, with religion or with our soul or our, inner self. So the four schools of thought across the world, and we're going to look at, this should have been in the other PowerPoint presentation, but we're going to look at how they turned out, right? How do we have actually four schools of thought? Why not one? Why not two? Why not more than four? Okay, so we're going to look at that, but just to give you an idea, for those of you who've heard of this before, the four Sunni schools of thought are Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki, and Shafi'i. So you can look at Pakistan here, it's Hanafi, mostly Hanafi, right? And then there's Jafari as well, there's orange here as well. Then if you look at Saudi Arabia, you find Hanbali, right? And North Africa is Maliki. So a large part of, Algeria, Morocco, all of these countries, and Egypt now, like I said, it used to be Shafi, now it's more Hanafi. But all of this is Maliki. And you can see Shafi here in some of these places in Indonesia, Malaysia. They follow Shafi fiqh. And you can see Ibadi here in Oman. It's famous to be majorly Ibadi country. Now, we haven't even done what these schools of thoughts are, but just to give you an idea that they are spread over, right? I mean, all of Muslims sort of take one of them, like they sort of ascribe to one of them, right? And this is just countries who are majorly Muslim. So we don't have UK, we don't have North America here. But if you do go to such places, you find that you have a mixture of all of them, right? So if you go to a masjid in the US, for example, it's more likely that you have a lot of Shafi people, a lot of Maliki, different I mean, you're going to have a mixture of all of them, and that's why people are more aware as well as more tolerant of the differences in all of these. And that's actually a very small difference. So let's open up the next PowerPoint slide, which will tell you a bit more about how we have these 4 schools of thought. But actually, I'm going to do this one first, because a lot of it is going to be just repetition. If you can see this, it's going to be what we did yesterday. A little bit of it is written down for you now. So the Deen of Islam covers the entire spectrum of life, sublime ma'rifah, intimate knowledge of Allah, to the mundane, how to purify after relieving ourselves, the maqasid or the functions of nubuwa. So the Deen of Islam, yani what is the Islamic scholarly tradition all about? It's your entire life, okay? Your spiritual life to the mundane. And then there was also the maqsad, the functions of nubuwa, which we haven't done yet, which are very interesting. So what is the function of prophethood? So we did this yesterday. I've just written it down for you, so it'll be easier to come back to it. That there are different rulings, or the different ahkam means again hukam, which means rulings pertaining to tenets of belief, of faith, which is aqaid. Aqidah ka jama hai, aqidah ka plural hai aqaid. Ahkam pertaining to discipline and strengthening of the self, which is Quranic ethics, or it can be called adab, or it can be called akhlaq. Okay, can you let me know if you hear me? I got disconnected, so I'm not sure if...
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what was the last thing you heard?
Can you hear me?
Nothing, ma'am.
Your voice was lagging, ma'am.
Okay. But what about this one? So you heard this, you saw and
Yes,
heard.
ma'am.
No, the functions of Nabuwa, ma'am, you were asking.
Yes.
Okay, the functions of Nubuwah are coming up. Just hold on. There's actually an ayah in the Quran that mentions that Ibrahim alayhis salam prayed for a prophet in his progeny, all right? And he mentioned the 4 things that he should be able to do. I should have Googled that out for you. Let me see, I don't think it's here. So there's always something that I end up missing, and which I want to share with you. So that ayah, let me take that out as well. Functions of Nubuwah. That ayah simply has 4 main functions. Yatlu alayhim al-kitab, which means to recite onto them the book. So in itself, just the recitation of the Quran itself has some importance, right? That's why we're reciting in Arabic, and not just the translation, right? तो उस Arabic में भी कोई बात है, कोई effect है. That's why people want to learn Arabic, right? The language in which Quran was revealed. Second purpose is to purify them. Let me just open up the verse for you so that it's clearer. Okay, so Surah Baqarah, you can't see this. This is okay. ربنا وبعث فيهم رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياتك. So send, O Lord, and send among them a messenger from themselves who will recite to them your verses and teach them the book and wisdom and purify them. So this was the dua made by Ibrahim alayhi salam. If you can see, there are 4 things that are outlined here. Okay, I'll just press this. You can see this, right? The first thing is to recite to them your verses. The second thing is yu'allimuhumul kitab, teach them the book, yani the Quran. Okay, and all the rulings and everything in it. And wal hikmah, and wisdom. Teach them the book and the wisdom, wa yuzakkihim, and to purify them. All right. So now there are 4 things that he prayed for, and by the end of Surah Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we sent you, and like as an answer to Ibrahim, we sent this prophet, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who again he repeats all of these purposes. Yatlu alayhim ayatihi, but also he puts yuzakihim after the first one. So after the recitation of the verses, Allah mentions and purify them and teach them the book and wisdom. I can look for that as well. But just to let you know, it's interesting how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did that. It's as if purification comes before even teaching. كما أرسلنا فيكم. Oh, even before. Okay, so this one, yes. كما أرسلنا فيكم رسولا منكم يتلو عليكم آياتنا ويزكيكم ويعلمكم الكتاب والحكمة. So here يتلو عليكم آياتنا, that he is reciting to you our verses, right? We sent a messenger from among yourselves reciting to you our verses and purifying you. يزكيكم. So this comes in the second place, whereas in the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, it was the last. It's almost as if Allah is saying this is even more important, or comes first. It comes before educating ourselves about the deen. Purifying ourselves, right? Our souls, our inner selves is even more important and comes before learning about deen and hikmah. So this is interesting. These are the 4 goals of prophethood outlined in the Quran. Okay, back to okay, 3 types of ahkam. We did this yesterday. Rules of conduct arising from the words and acts of the subject. That's fiqh. It means ibadah, worship, ma'mulat, and other than worship, family law, trade, finance, oaths, crimes, etc. All of this come under the 3rd types of rules that are in the Quran, right? That make up the Sharia. So Islamic scholarly tradition could be divided into these 3 things. Ilm al-Kalam is simply the theological tradition. Ilm al-Tasawwuf is the spiritual, and the legal tradition is fiqh and usul al-fiqh. We did this yesterday. And we're going to be looking at the lifetime of the Prophet, the age of the Sahaba, the age of the Tabi'een, and the age of the Taba Tabi'een. I hope I don't have to translate these, but I should maybe. So this is the Tabi'een, yani the followers, and the Taba Tabi'een, the followers of the followers. Okay, hopefully that's clear now. The legal tradition entails the laws of the Sharia and how those laws are made. So even the usul al-fiqh are the how of it. Remember we did this yesterday? Okay, fiqh is the law, but usul al-fiqh is basically the methodology or how those laws were made. The Prophet ﷺ himself was the lawmaker. Can you hold on to questions? I mean, hold on to the questions and ask at the end.
Just related to this, ma'am.
Okay, you can ask.
In Quran, we see that the word Ulil Amr. What does it mean, Ulil Amr? Do we mean ulama ikram from this
That's a
or
good
something
question.
else?
उसमें जो commentary है, उसकी understanding है कि ये दोनों इससे मुराद हैं. यानी even the leaders of a place, यानी the secular leader भी जो है ना, उसको भी follow करने का मुराद ये है कि for example, you stop at a traffic light, okay? It's red and you have to stop. Maybe it's midnight and you're like, nobody else is coming, but on the safer side, you should stop at that red, because हो सकता है कि दूसरी side से जो जहाँ पर green है, maybe somebody's coming at really fast speed thinking that nobody's there. So you should still stop at the red light. And following traffic signals is actually incumbent upon us, even according to Deen. According to Islam, you all have to follow these because it's for the safety of the entire society. ठीक है? तो इसमें उलुल अमर जो हैं, they are the people that are your leaders secularly speaking, but also your leaders in religion. ये दोनों का आता है. So religiously speaking, yes, follow the fatwas of the mufti people amongst you, and also follow the leaders. So दोनों के meanings आते हैं इसमें in ulul amr. All right. So two
And
types of जी.
Qiyas is allowed in Islam, man. We
Yes,
do
yes. Qiyas is
compare the
analogy, and we're gonna do that. अभी हम उस पे पहुंचे नहीं हैं, ठीक है? So we'll do that inshallah. Two types of revelation. We did this yesterday. Wahi matlu, and I didn't type it down, I think. So this is why it's written here. I just mentioned it. Wahi matlu means recited, which is the Quran. Wahi ghair matlu, or not recited, is the Sunnah. Gani, the point here being that the Sunnah or the Hadith of the Prophet, it is still Wahi. Wahi means revelation. It's still a Wahi, right? It's still something revealed by Allah, even though it's not recited. Yani it's not exactly in the words of Allah, but it's still revealed to the Prophet by Allah. The Sunnah and the Quran, the Sunnah may consist of rules that merely confirm and reiterate the Quran. The Sunnah may consist of an explanation. This is in your reading, the Sunnah. Okay? If you can take it out, you can mark this so that you know where this is coming from. So in your law module, the first reading is Qat'i and Zanni. This is really important. Okay, because this is where all of the differences in interpretation are coming from. Qat'i and Zanni. Can you see that? So this is page 129. 129 of your reading package. From the book, The First Source of the Sharia, the Quran. And it is titled The Definitive, Qat'i, and the Speculative, Zanni. So because we have different terms or words that are definitive and other words that are speculative or Zanni, that are open to ijtihad. So what do you think will be open to ijtihad? Okay, first let me tell you this, the Sunnah and the Quran. The reading after this, page 133, the Sunnah. Page 133, priority of the Quran over the Sunnah. This is a reading on the Sunnah, and this is exactly what this is going to be discussing. The Sunnah may consist of rules that merely confirm and reiterate the Quran, or it may consist of an explanation or clarification to the Quran, or it may consist of rulings on which the Quran is silent. Okay, all of this is done in the Sunnah. Yeah, so there's a lot of chatting going on. देखिए आप please अगर मुझे email कर देंगे ना या it'll be much easier. So for example, I think you mentioned something which maybe we didn't understand what situation you were telling us, and you were saying that act like a dumb isn't to act blindly. So what are you referring to? Because I thought I said that it's not okay. जो आपने एक example दी थी कि अगर कोई एक आपको कोई थप्पड़ मार है तो आप जो दूसरी गाल भी दे दें. That's like a saying. I don't know. Some people say that. So that's not okay. So I'm not sure what you're referring to here. What exactly do you mean when you're saying?
मैम
जी.
मैम बस उसका मतलब ये है कि मतलब जालिम को इस तरह रास्ता देना, ये भी एक मतलब जुल्म को आगे लाने का एक तरीका है. मतलब ये जो आपने मतलब आज बयान किया कि आप कोई बंदा आपको तंग करे या कुछ भी करे तो आप उसको माफ करके उससे अच्छाई करो, लेकिन ये एक जालिम के सेंस में अच्छा नहीं रहेगा. ये बात
ये जालिम के सेंस में बिल्कुल अच्छा नहीं रहेगा. आप बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं. और इसमें हदीस भी आती है कि अगर आप किसी जालिम को हेल्प कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, यानी उसको नहीं रोक रहे हैं, तो आपने गोया कि उसके जुल्म में मदद की है, ठीक है ना, तो आपकी भी पकड़ होगी उसमें। तो यस, यू आर नॉट सपोज टू डू दैट। तो लाइक आई सेड कि वो सारी चीज़ें आपने सामने लेके चलनी है कि जुल्म अगर हो रहा है और आपने उसको कुछ भी नहीं किया रोकने के लिए, तो यू विल बी एज इफ यू हेल्प्ड दैट पर्सन। हालांकि आप वहीं खड़े हैं, आप कुछ नहीं कर रहे, यू डिडंट हेल्प देम, लेकिन आपने रोका भी नहीं, तो इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि आपने उस जुल्म को रोका नहीं। यू विल बी अकाउंटेबल फॉर दैट, राइट, एंड डिपेंडिंग ऑन द सिचुएशन। तो बहरहाल वो बात यही थी दैट पूरा आपने सिचुएशन यानी आपने लेना है। टॉक्सिक रिलेशनशिप की मैं इसीलिए बात कर रही थी कि कई दफ़ा अनफॉर्चुनेटली जिन रिश्तों को अल्लाह ताला ने कहा हुआ है कि आपने निभाना है, उन्हीं रिश्तों से कई दफ़ा इंसान हर्ट हो रहा होता है। तो क्या करें, यानी दो तरफ आप, एक तरफ आपने उनका ख्याल रखना है, अल्लाह ताला ने कहा है, और एक तरफ वो आपको हर्ट करें, अल्लाह ताला ने कहा है कि आप अपने आप को हर्ट नहीं होने दें, राइट, यानी या डोंट एक्ट डाउन लाइक यू आर सेइंग, लाइक यू हैव टू बी इंटेलिजेंट इनफ कि आप दोबारा हर्ट ना हो। तो आपने उस सिचुएशन को उस तरह से देखना होगा कि दोनों किस तरह मैं कर सकता हूँ, यानी हाउ कैन आई कीप दिस रिलेशनशिप इन अ मैनर दैट आई एम नॉट हर्ट, ठीक है, इन अ मैनर कि मैं अपने आप को भी बचा सकूँ। तो ये तो अब सिचुएशन पे ही डिपेंड करेगा और उसके हिसाब से इंसान ने फिर डिसीजन लेना होगा कि क्या करें। तो
मैम
अच्छा,
ये जो हिदायत ने बात की है ना, ये वो है कि तब जब आप तब माफ करो जब यू हैव द पावर टू टेक रिवेंज। ये नहीं कि अगर आप अपने से बड़ा बंदा देख लिया और आप डर के माफ कर दो, दैट इज व्हाट क्रूएलिटी इज। ठीक है, अपने से छोटा बंदा
एग्जैक्टली,
आपने देखा तब आपके पास आपने माफ करना है, यू व्हेन यू हैव द पावर टू टेक रिवेंज।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, यानी एंगर का भी ये कहा जाता है ना कि गुस्सा जो आपने, यानी when you have the power to carry out that unlawful anger but you hold it back, that's what it means to swallow your anger। यानी इसकी भी explanation यही आती है कि आपके कोई माँ तहत, यानी somebody who is under you that you can take revenge, that's what it means। That's why I was saying this is a very general legal maxim, you cannot apply it to any हर situation में आप वो apply करते हैं अपनी समझ के मुताबिक, तो गलती होगी आपसे बेटा। प्लीज ये बंद कर दो डोर।
I have another question.
अच्छा, isn't it possible कि आप ईमेल मुझे करते सारे क्वेश्चन? नॉट पॉसिबल?
Yes, ma'am, I will do it. Thank you.
ओके ओके। तो फ़र्द आइनी एंड फ़र्द किफ़ाया हमने कल किया था, ये भी मैं जस्ट रोट इट डाउन हियर फॉर योर सेक, यू हैव इट रिटन डाउन समवेयर, एंड दिस इज दैट आया व्हिच आई सेड। ज़करिया बेटे, मैंने कहा था दरवाज़ा बंद कर दें प्लीज, आई हैव टू कीप क्लोजिंग इट बिकॉज डिस्टर्बेंस हो रही है, आवाज़ आ रही है। So this ayah, and it is not for the believers to go forth to battle all at once, for there should separate from every division of them a group to obtain understanding in the religion and warn their people when they return to them, that they may be cautious। So यहाँ पे जो बात है लियतफ़क़्क़हू फ़ी दीन का word use हो रहा है, so that they have understanding of deen। Because if you look at लियतफ़क़्क़ू, there the root letters are fa, qaf and ha, which is fiqh। That's where fiqh is coming from. Fiqh means understanding. So to have understanding in deen, there should be a group of you that stays behind. We did this yesterday and I put it down here because I hadn't put down the ayah there. And it's explaining that the faqh, according to the verse in the last slide, means the virtue and merit of the faqh or understanding of the deen. It's a full-time activity and it's a specialist activity. Not everyone will do this activity and the rest of the people will follow the specialists in legal rulings. Yani that ayah is telling us that there should be someone staying behind. It's a full-time activity. You'll have to spend your entire, time, invest your time in it and devote your life to it. Acha, exercise of expert legal opinion or tafaqquh has to, this I can take out for you honestly, but this part is just repeating how Sayyidina Mu'adh ibn Jabal, when I mentioned this yesterday, he was sent to Yemen. He said that he'll follow the Quran. If not that, then he'll follow the Sunnah. If the answer is not in that, then he'll follow his expert legal opinion. Okay, in light of the two, yani in light of the Quran and the Sunnah. So his own rai, it's not like his mere personal opinion, it's an expert legal opinion depending in the light of the Quran and the Sunnah. When no revelation revealed on an issue, the first part, like this mashwara or consultation with fuqaha or legal experts, sahaba, you have that in the time of the four Khulafai Rashidin as well. ठीक है? I think this is just a repetition, honestly. So far, we have the laws themselves, fiqh, the principles used to derive those laws, usul, and the primary sources of Islamic law, the Quran and the Sunnah. And because not everything is in the Quran and the Sunnah, therefore, if something is not explicitly stated in the primary sources, there are secondary sources from which laws can be derived. Secondary sources are based on the primary sources. So it's not like secondary sources are just, you know, like not related at all to the primary sources. There is a hierarchy between these sources. So when a specific ruling is not in the Quran and Sunnah, then a legal expert, a faqih, should use their expert legal opinion based on scriptural knowledge to come up with an answer. That is ijtihad. So this is actually the definition of ijtihad. One of you asked yesterday, right? Ijtihad actually hai kya? It's the coming up to an expert legal opinion based on scriptural knowledge, based on the knowledge of the entire corpus of Quran, entire corpus of Hadith, and come to an answer of a specific situation. Interestingly, there are only 350 legal ayat in the Quran. Okay? Just 350 legal ayat. The others are more spiritual in nature. Okay? And there are only 1,000 hadiths relevant to issues of fiqh. The rest are what? The rest are more spiritual in nature. They're talking about aqidah. They're talking about your tasawwuf, your how to purify your spiritual self, how to become a better person. But the general principles, usul, okay, what are usul? Essentially, the general principles to come up with the law, right? In the Quran and the Sunnah facilitate derivation of countless legal rulings. Yani 350 legal ayat का मतलब ये नहीं है कि सिर्फ 350 rulings हैं, ठीक है? You're going to use the entire Quran and the entire Hadith corpus to understand the general principles that Allah wanted us to follow in this dunya. And using those principles from the Quran and the Hadith, you come up with the entire law, okay? The entire corpus of law. Ibn Hazm said that every single chapter of fiqh finds its origins in the Quran, okay? तो हर चीज़ जो आपको लॉ में मिलेगी वो कुरान में ही उसका origin है, which is then explained and elaborated by the Sunnah. And Al-Shatibi said, experience shows that every alim who has resorted to the Quran in search of a solution to a problem has found in the Quran a principle that has provided him with guidance on the subject. So again, that principle always comes from the Quran, and I'm going to give you an example for that, inshallah, shortly. Okay. This, honestly, I can take it out from your syllabus. These last 3 slides is just, giving examples at the age of the Khulafai Rashidin. For example, in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he carried out the sunnah of mashwara that he held a mashwara or a shura, isko shura kehte the, consultation of legal matters with the fuqaha sahaba. So the fuqaha sahaba were, I have to show you that table as well, the names of the fuqaha sahaba. For the group of people who refused to pay zakah. So in the time of the Prophet, there were no Muslims who refused to pay zakah. In the time of Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, there was a new situation. There was a group who just said, we are not going to pay zakah. Okay? So outrightly refused to pay zakah. So he sort of got all of the fuqaha sahaba together to decide what to do. Second, it referred to the consensus of the fuqaha sahaba, and he passed rulings based on analogy. Analogy simply means qiyas. Qiyas means analogy. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu engaged in maslaha mursala. This was also in the previous slide. What it means is engaging in a deeper understanding of the texts that is prompted by societal interest. Like I gave you an example, stealing food in famine-stricken areas. Okay? That will not account for the had punishment, right? इसके ऊपर had punishment नहीं दी जाएगी, ठीक है ना? क्योंकि इसको deeper एक understanding आपको हासिल हुई है उस punishment के बारे में. ज़ाहिर सी बात है, अल्लाह ताला put that had punishment there so that people's wealth will be secure, ताकि आप safety feel करें, ठीक है? तो just to give you an example, I mean, when I used to be in Jeddah till my A-levels, we never locked our house. And one of my chachas, he came from Pakistan, and they were so shocked and they were so worried also कि आप लोग lock नहीं कर रहे. But this is how it was, mashallah. That's how secure it was. We never felt like, there was no need to lock our houses. And khair, baharal, that's not, you guys can come to different conclusions because when I'm saying that, but I'm just giving you one example of what, what level of safety and security there should be ideally. But there are also injustices in different areas, and it's just it's complicated. It's like no system is perfect in that manner, right? What we're studying, in fact, the theory is what should be. Okay? In actuality, in the world, you don't 100% find it that way, unfortunately, but at least we should know the theory, right? So that we can work towards it. Establishment of qazis, judges, and courts. Can you please hold on? Zaki, you cannot keep opening this door. I can still hear someone. Okay, so these are examples of new situations that the Khulafa Rashidin were facing, okay, and how they did ijtihad. And it was like, for one area, there was one faqih at that point. Yani they refer to that faqih sahabi. So for example, Yemen mein bheje gaye the Muaz ibn Jabal. So Muaz ibn Jabal was that faqih who they went to ask all their questions. Okay, now, and this was, did I not open this up? I think I did. Yes, this one. So these are the fuqaha, sahabi, yani the companions of the Prophet who were considered the fuqaha. So this was Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu is also in it. Hazrat Abu Bakr, Hazrat Umar, Hazrat Uthman, Hazrat Ali. The four Khulafai Rashideen were definitely fuqaha, legal experts. Apart from them, there was Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who is well known as a mufassir of the Quran. He is known as a commentator of the Quran. So a lot of, commentary of the Quran comes from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud as well as Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Ibn Abbas, just mentioned as Ibn Abbas here. Ubay ibn Ka'b, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, you heard about him, Ammar ibn Yasir, Abu Darda, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, Salman al-Farsi radiallahu anhu, and Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha. And then you have a list here just to have an idea. Major figures from the companions, apart from the four Khulafai Rashidin, those who narrated the Hadees. Okay? So you see the Muhaddiseen Sahabi are different from the Fuqaha Sahabi. You have Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu here. Okay? Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha is also here, but then there are also other Sahabi like Jabir ibn Abdullah, who's not mentioned as a faqih, but he's mentioned as a muhaddis, right? As a person who narrated hadith. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, and Salama radiallahu anha. Figures commonly cited from the succeeding generation. This is the succeeding generation means what? The Tabi'een, the generation after the Sahaba. So there were jurists, 7 jurists of Medina, early jurists, most cited tafsir narrators. Okay? Compilers of hadith, yahan pe wo mentioned hai, and then other juristic authorities, just to give you an idea. This was the last 2 slides of the 4 schools of thought, and we were supposed to do this today. So how did these 4 schools of thought come about? So I told you a little bit about, the fuqaha, sahaba, who were teaching the next generation all of fiqh. Okay? And then there were some tabi'een who also gave fatwa. So Hassan al-Basri, I think I need to turn on the slideshow so that it's clearer. So there were some followers who also gave fatwa like Hassan al-Basri, Taus, Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, Yahya ibn Kathir, Ibn Sirin, Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab, and Abu Hanifa. So they learned from the fuqaha sahaba, and then now in their generation, these were the ones who were known to be faqih tabi'een. So in the age of the Tabi'in and the Taba Tabi'in, there were halaqas that were formed, okay? And there were more than 100 halaqas actually, but 17 to 20 were top-notch halaqas of fiqh, usul and ijtihad, meaning that, for example, you know, those people, those students who are going to different sahaba and recording all of that information, 17 to 20 of these halaqas became really famous amongst them. You know, students were also master scholars, and there were two types of students: those that were dedicated and those that were traveling. Dedicated means they were you know, living with perhaps one of the sahabi and dedicated to learning everything from that region. Then there were other who were traveling. So by this time there were sahaba in Kufa as well, right? So they were traveling to the different sahabas and narrating and writing down, noting all of the hadiths that they could about different topics. So what happened in these halaqas? There was derivation of usul. It facilitated the derivation of new rules and reconciled conflicts. They gathered and compiled all of the different rulings in the Sharia topic-wise. They organized all of the rulings present in the Quran and Sunnah. Acha. Extracted general principles from rulings already present in the Quran and Sunnah, derived general principles of usul broadly from the Quran and the Sunnah, and designed new usul based on pure ijtihad, anchored in well-founded knowledge, to provide criteria for preference of multiple or conflicting legal rulings. A need for ascertaining authenticity and making sense of differences and multiplicity. There was a need to interpret and understand the tradition and a need to come up with methods to help to do so. Much of the science of Islamic jurisprudence, usulul fiqh, developed in order to provide consistent mechanisms for resolving such conflicts. So you see in your understanding the four mazhabs, that reading, there are examples given by the author that are used by the fuqaha to resolve conflicts amongst different scriptures, different hadiths as well, right? Different ayahs, sometimes the Quran and the hadith. So how does one reconcile such conflicts? A proper methodology was developed. Okay? So there was an attempt to reduce human error. कि अगर हर इंसान खुद ही करेगा तो there is more, you know, there is more greater chance for him or her to commit human error. But if there is a proper methodology, looking at all of the, you know, corpus of law already present, then if there's a proper methodology, then what does that do? It reduces human error. What were the new developments? Sense of continuity in the knowledge being passed down, okay? And the piecing together of knowledge, that there were no longer just specialist students doing this. I actually wrote down. Okay, so here are some new things that developed. No longer specialist students here means that it was not just specialist students, but there were people who were also auditing, and there were students who were not dedicated entirely, right? So because of course everybody wants to gain knowledge, okay? But this was something new, because before this it was just specialist students that were learning this, encountered with differences in opinions of their tabi'in teachers. So you see, which generation is this? We're talking about the developments of the taba tabi'in learning from their tabi'in teachers. And unfortunately, there was also fabrication. So have you heard of hadith mawzu? A mawzu hadith is a fabricated hadith. And there are books, you can find books that, you know, the muhaddiseen, they wrote down the fabricated hadiths. These are not called weak hadiths. हम कई दफ़ा ज़ईफ़ hadith या weak hadith को fabricated समझते हैं. Fabrication means it's completely wrong, and those were written down in separate books. So they were taken out of the hadith corpus because they're fabricated, right? But this was unfortunately a, you know, development in the third generation. In the generation of the Taba Tabi'in, they had to also deal with, you know, sifting sifting through the hadith and separating the fabricated ones. Textualization of hadith, transformation from sunnah to hadith. So the question here is, was the hadith written down? If you look at the historical view of what was happening, the Prophet told the Sahaba not to write down hadith, but then later on he allowed it. And he said that this should be separate from the Quran, right? Not to mix up the Quran and the hadith. So there were people who were writing down hadiths, and you do have different Sahaba who were writing them down, and I'll show you. And later the Prophet allowed the writing down of hadith, right? And they were writing this down as a personal thing. It was because there was a chance of confusing this with the Quran, right? But the idea is that these people, Hazrat Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, Ali radiallahu anhu, Anas ibn Malik.
Your voice is lagging.
It's cutting? Okay, let me. Okay, so fabricated hadith is a mawzu hadith. Mawzu. You know how you have in the Arabic language you have wada'a. The three root letters are waw, dwad, and ayn. So that means to coin something. So mawdu means something that was coined. Mawdu hadith. So these were actually meant for personal use or personal notes, the hadiths that were written down. And they were all based on an individual effort, not a collective institutional level. This is at the time of the Sahaba Karam. Okay? So this was at the time of the companions of the Prophet, and now in the third generation, you have a transformation from Sunnah to Hadith, and you have a lot of textualization of Hadith. Everything is written down now, okay? So they are looking at conflicting Hadith and making sense of it. These are the four foundational faqihs, right? जिनके नाम के ऊपर four school of thought बन गए, but that doesn't mean when you're talking about Hanafi fiqh or Maliki fiqh or Shafi'i fiqh, we're not saying that these people came up with the fiqh and we're following that. No, actually Imam Abu Hanifa in Kufa had a board of 40 scholars. He actually had 40 scholars on board, and they were all working together. So it was like a consensus of their work, right? Imam Malik was in Medina, Hijaz, Imam Shafi was in Egypt, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was in Baghdad. And they were almost contemporaries, almost. And this is what you need to know. We'll do this a little bit in greater depth, but basically what's happening here is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is the Mufassir Sahabi. Okay? He is the commentator of the Quran and also a faqih, and he had these 6 main students, 6 specialist students, okay, of the amongst the tabi'een: Alqama, Aswad, Masruq, Abida, Amr ibn Shurahbil, and Harith ibn Qais. And from these specialist students, you had one special student, Ibrahim Nakhai, who became famous, who taught Hamad, who taught Abu Hanifa. So where is Imam Abu Hanifa getting, most of his interpretations, right, from? They are from the work of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and his students all the way to his teacher Hamad. And then he had 2 very famous students, Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf, who these 2 actually came up with their own rulings as well. And a lot of times Hanafi fiqh, in dono ko kehte Imam Muhammad, Imam Abu Yusuf ko Sahabain kehte hain, right? So a lot of times in the fiqh books, you'll find that Imam Abu Hanifa said one thing and Sahabain said another. So sometimes the fatwa that is given is what Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf said. So this work is being done continuously, right? The work of ijtihad, which is why you can say that they would take the ruling of Imam Muhammad, Imam Abu Yusuf over the ruling of Abu Hanifa, because they're not saying that Imam Abu Hanifa always has the best answers. Sometimes his students they came up with better answers, right? So the scholars, they had peer review. You know what peer review is? That your peers who have the same amount of knowledge and work as you have done, they can give you a better review of the work that you've done, right? So okay, did we do this or no? I don't remember if I gave you this example. I think I did, but please let me know if I didn't. So I gave you this example of this word ila in the Arabic language, which means to wash your hands till the elbows. Did I give you this example in the first few classes? When I gave you an example, if
No,
you
ma'am.
travel, you travel. So let's suppose you travel to Islamabad from Lahore and you have not entered Islamabad, but you're at the toll plaza and you call back home and you say, I've traveled till Islamabad, or you maybe post on Instagram, right? Traveled from Lahore to Islamabad. So because you've reached the toll plaza, you would say, I've traveled to Islamabad. You use the word to indicate, the destination without including it. You haven't really entered Islamabad yet. At other times, you might say कि toll plaza पे ये हो सकता है कोई कहे कि अच्छा call back home and you say हम toll plaza पे पहुंच गए. I'll let you know जब हम घर पहुंच जाएं. So you're saying that you're including the destination in it. So one example of this is wash your hands till the elbows. Does that mean including the elbows, or does that mean till the elbows but not including the elbows? So do you exclude elbows or do you include elbows? ठीक है, अब कुरान में ये आयत आती है कि आप अपने हाथ धोएं एल्बोज तक. नाउ इंटरेस्टिंगली देखें, अगर अल्लाह ताला चाहते, अगर ये सिंपल होता कि सब सहाबी ने प्रॉफेट सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को देखा होता और उन्होंने एल्बोज को इंक्लूड किया होता, एंड दे वर वेरी क्लियर अबाउट इट. ठीक है, तो इसमें कोई डिफरेंस ऑफ ओपिनियन नहीं आना था. But interestingly, because there was no such clear आपके लिए proof, ठीक है, of one thing, of either thing, in inclusion or exclusion, इस वजह से इसमें difference of opinion आ गया. So you will call this zanni. You will call this an ayah that was zanni, which was, do you remember what zanni meant? Qat'i and zanni. Qat'i means definitive and zanni means speculative. So all of these differences of law actually occur when you have ayahs or terms that are zanni in nature or that are speculative, that you can have more than one answers to that. ठीक है, अब मैं आपको एक example देती हूँ to show you कि you guys are how many are in the class. 56 of you are in class right now. ठीक है, अच्छा, अब आप लोग 56 of you, let me give you an example and then you can vote. Okay? Okay. So let's say that a person, oh, we are way beyond our time. Not way beyond, actually 2 minutes over time, but I wanted to do this example with you. So maybe do you think we should leave it up to next week then? I think there are people who have some class that is. Okay, so can you remind me, we're going to start with this in the next class. We're going to start with this example and you guys will have to vote. And I think in our physical class, it'll be much better, inshallah. So next week in class, you're going to vote for between 4 things. I'm going to give you a situation and you will have to choose, given whatever knowledge you have of deen, okay? And choose between 1, 2, 3, 4. Just choose one of them. And the beauty of it is that every time we do this in class, people choose, यानी ऐसा कुछ नहीं, ऐसा कभी नहीं हुआ कि उनमें से एक ऐसा जो किसी ने भी चूज नहीं किया. Like everybody thinks differently in that manner. But khair, that's an exercise we'll do inshallah in the next class, because I think I shouldn't do it abhi. We'll begin with that. All right. So I'm going to call it a day inshallah. And if anyone has questions, you guys can please email me or WhatsApp me. Okay? Even if it's a list of questions, you can do that. And let me just look at what we have covered and what we yet have to cover. So this is so is it a very jumbled up? Is everything very jumbled up? Or again, I mean, yes, we're going to start from here in the next class. Chana, you still have to do a lot of readings, okay? And for next week, I will suggest you do this short reading, Qat'i and Zanni, on page 129. So please read page 129 and 130 for next week as well. Okay? 129 and 130. Okay. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.